Hello everybody. I am a great believer that in life one should always choose the right tool for the right job. And I extend that sentiment to include cars as well. I'm very fortunate that I have the space and the means to have a very modest collection of vehicles at my disposal. If it's a gorgeous sunny day and I want something fun and sporty, I'll pick up the keys for the Honda. If I want to attack a back road and relive my 90s rally hero moments, I'll grab my Celica GT4. And if I want to just waft around in luxury, my old 7 Series is for that, if it's working. But today's vehicle is the kind of car designed almost exclusively for somebody that doesn't have the luxury of multiple cars for multiple needs. They need something to do everything. And the Audi S4 seems to be, on paper at least, an excellent contender for that role. The S4 has always been an unusual vehicle. Historically, I've always been a bit of a BM person, so I've never really quite understood the Audi S range. For a long time, there wasn't always a really direct BMW equivalent either. The B6 and B7 S4 in particular had that crazy V8 where BMW may do with a straight 6 even in the full-fat M3. Okay, you then got a V8 with the E92, but then still, what was the equivalent to the S cars? I suppose the real rival, of course, was the 335i, but it's only in the last few years where we've seen the rise of the M lights, the M340i, and so on and so forth. Even just looking at the Audi range, the S4 has changed its identity quite a few times. It started off way back when with a turbocharged 5-cylinder. 2 generations got that brilliant 4.2 litre V8. Then, possibly my favourite iteration, you had the supercharged B8 S4. And with a little bit of tweaking, you could have a car that would rival the RS4 in terms of straight line speed, if not everything else. Recently though, Audi changed tack dramatically, and they decided for the European market to make the S4, along with many other S-badged products, a diesel. You'd think, with Dieselgate still fairly fresh in memory, that the VAG empire would be doing everything they could to distance themselves from that fuel, but the way legislation here in Europe works means that it's still the kind of option of choice for very many people. And so ultimately, what is the S4 for? Because we need to understand that in order to be able to judge it. It is the do-everything car, particularly here in Avant or Estate or wagon form. It's not Nardo Grey, this one. I thought it was. It's not. It's colour called Quantum Grey. And for a press car, this is also very modestly specified. There's only about 5 things on the options list: a slightly bigger AdBlue tank, comfort and sound pack, a storage pack, and a couple of other small inconsequential items, and those bring the total price of this car to just over £54,000. Sounds like a lot, but in today's world, it really isn't, I'm afraid. You certainly get plenty of toys, you get all the usual refinements, and I have to say that the interior treatment of this car is probably one of the better in modern Audis. I still have a burning hatred for all of this iPad stuck to the dashboard kind of thing that Mercedes, among others, kicked off about a decade ago. That being said, the screen is nice, clear, high resolution, and mercifully, in this car, unlike some of the other high-end Audis, RS6 and so on that I've driven, the HVAC controls are still physical controls, and really nice ones too. There's no need to have anything other than this setup for HVAC. It works perfectly. You've also got your Audi Virtual Cockpit, which remains one of the best systems of its kind. Very easy to use, very clear. You can see everything that you need to, and really, you could do entirely without this central screen here, which is what Audi do in the R8. Frankly, I'd like that screen to be gone, or at least have the option to make it disappear like you could in some other Audi products. That 3-litre V6 up front produces about 350 horsepower, or about 347 I think if you're counting, and over 500 pound-feet of torque, 700 newton-meters. That is a lot, which means that this is not a slow car. Another change of direction that Audi have had is the ditching in almost all of their lineup of a dual clutch gearbox for top-end models. The mid-range cars still have a dual clutch as their automatic option, but all the beefy cars now have the ubiquitous ZF 8-speed. Audi cite that gearbox's superior torque handling capabilities as the sole reason for that decision. You can, of course, drive it in manual mode should you desire, and I will be doing that in a minute. to drive normally, the S4 is a joy. It's very nice. It's actually remarkably comfortable too. I have driven quite a few cars recently that should be nicely sprung, that in fact aren't. This one though rides really well. I believe it's even on passive dampers. Well, I suspect it is, because if you go into the customizable drive modes under individual, you will not find anything for the suspension. You've only got drive system, steering and engine sound. That's it. In terms of that engine sound, it does make something of a noise. At times it can sound a little bit like Sebulba's Pod Racer. It's never a nice noise, but that's fine. That actually doesn't bother me too much. As you would expect, this does feel in here like an extremely high quality product. I really like these nice red diamond stitched leather seats. Audi steering wheels are still some of my absolute favourites. Nice and thin, just the right size, buttons full, all pleasingly to hand. Your stalks, controls, everything exactly where you want them to be. They have spent some considerable time thinking this all through. And in fact, one of my criticisms of the A8 was the fact that you couldn't really distinguish it from the other products in the Audi lineup. When you're in an A4 based car, of course that works the other way around. It feels essentially like an A8 in here. Very nice place to be. There's plenty of stowage space, and I am indeed doing a run to the airport tomorrow, and this is really the perfect car for that. You've got plenty of space in the back, the panoramic sunroof, which is also one of the other few options, and I think the biggest option on this car's spec sheet, makes it nice in the back for passengers. You've got, of course, an electrically operated tailgate and plenty of room in the back too, so it is an ideal all-rounder. But if you're simply interested in a practical car, there are lots of other cheaper ways to achieve that. Why would you have an S4? Well, you have an S4 because you have an interest in performance. So how does this car go? There's no two ways around it. This is a devastatingly capable car. You can cross ground with the utmost ease at an absolutely ludicrous pace. The highlight is no doubt the suspension. It's just so nicely damped. Such a rare thing to encounter in a fairly hot saloon car these days.
However, this is one modern Audi I've driven where understeer is very much a problem. At road speeds in more difficult corners, the car's sheer mass will overload the front tyres. It doesn't ruin the experience in a car like this for me, and you'll soon learn that the quickest way to drive the car is to adopt a slow-in, fast-out approach.
Unsurprisingly, the dominant feature of that engine is the torque that it can produce. It really can throw you and this 1800 kilo car down the road with complete disdain. But it isn't the most engaging unit to use. As a diesel, it tops out at about 5,000 RPM, and in truth, you feel like you want to change gear before you've even hit that. Gear shifts are smooth, but they're never crisp. It's certainly better calibrated than some other cars I've driven where you get a real pause as you change up, almost like some of the old school sequential manual boxes, but it just doesn't feel like a genuinely sporty gearbox, and I'm driving it currently in dynamic mode too. The steering is okay. There's no feedback through it, there's no texture, there's no information, there's not really any weighting either, as you would sadly come to expect from most modern Audis, but it's very direct. The car does exactly what you tell it to, and of course, with their trademark Quattro all-wheel drive system, the thing just grips and grips. You're never in any doubt that it will get you around that bend. It's also relatively easy to place. The view out's pretty good, and a marked improvement on many older Audis that I've driven. The old B6 A4 in particular, and B5 I think actually were awful for that, but this is really quite nice. The throttle pedal is certainly a weak point too. I feel like you play throttle roulette with it. Reminds me in many ways of the Maserati 3200 that I drove not too long ago. You put your foot down a little bit, and you don't get much. Then you put it down a little bit more, and you get everything. It's also very laggy, this lump. Allow me to demonstrate what I mean. So we are now doing, let's get down the speed a little bit. Okay, we're doing 30 mile an hour, and we are actually just over 30 mile. Actually, let's be even fairer. Let's get into 3,000 RPM, second gear. Okay, and I'm just gonna bury my foot. Okay, so ready, and foot down. And yeah, it takes a long time. It's even worse if you happen to have the car in automatic mode. So I've got this car in Sporty dynamic. It's even got the S down there. And I'm doing 35 mile an hour. Let's do the cyclist test. Let's pretend I'm on a nice country road. Yes, cyclists everywhere. I've had loads of them this evening. One of the reasons I'm doing this review in the evening, by the way, is it's been very hot today. So let's pretend we've got a cyclist coming up. I got a bit of visibility, but not too much, and I want to get past them. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing 30 mile an hour, which is okay, maybe a little bit quicker than a cyclist would be doing. So I'm like, okay, all right, okay. Oh, there's my gap. All right, foot down now, and then it goes. A lot of delay. Nothing really unique to the S4 in that department. Many modern cars are like it, but it's a shame because one of the great things about diesel engines should be the instant and immediate torque, but this still doesn't have it. You still got to work the gears and work the engine if you really want to get the best out of it. You've got to keep it on the boil to really get it to shift, and when it wants to shift, well, believe me, it can go. I attended the UK media launch of this car last year. I sat through all the presentations where Audi looked at all of their rivals and so on and so forth. Now, of cars I would consider a rival, I've only really driven one, which is the Jaguar XF. And I would say that the Audi is certainly a more refined and rounded product. The Jaguar had some pretty major dynamic flaws that were, quite frankly, inexcusable in any car, let alone a fairly expensive one. This feels not just one, but perhaps two generations newer than the Jag as well. JLR's tech is in some cases embarrassingly out of date. This feels, in comparison, box fresh. The primary motivator, of course, behind going for a diesel engine has to be not a power or torque improvement, but an economy and efficiency one. This car has a few tricks up its sleeve, like for example it can coast, and it does like to do that, anywhere between I think about 30 and 99 mile an hour, something like that. It can engage coasting mode. It does that a lot. Over the few hundred miles I've had the car, I've averaged about 36 miles to the gallon, and to give you an idea, while doing this review, which has been pretty spirited, I've actually averaged 28 and a half. For a performance car, it's not too bad actually, especially when you consider how much this thing weighs and the fact that it has permanent all-wheel drive.
In fact, on the airport run I did the following day, a 200-mile round trip to Heathrow and back on the motorway, the car achieved 45 miles to the gallon. In the 3-litre diesel XF, which was two-wheel drive, I got nowhere close to that.
In the SQ7, Audi have already ditched the diesel engine that they had for that car and are going back to petrol. Whether they're going to do the same with the S4 remains to be seen. I think it's less likely because this engine feels like a much more natural fit for this car. Initially it took some getting used to because when I believe I drove this car on the launch I had some real problems with getting away from junctions and so on. Whether it's a software update or the fact that I've just got a little bit more used to the car as a driver, I couldn't say, but it's certainly a marked improvement. And it means that this car is no longer slightly scary in certain situations where I thought that it was previously. Ultimately, the S4 really is a jack of all trades, and sadly also a master of none. It is extremely competent, and if you want a reasonably economical, yet quite quick load lugger, you could do a lot worse than this car. I was worried when I asked Audi for it for a long-term review because I feared that I might just get more annoyed with it as time went on, but actually, most surprisingly, what you really have to do to enjoy this car is take the reins, shift it into manual mode, and then, when you get it into its happy place, it becomes much more enjoyable, exciting, and engaging, and not a great driver's car, but a better driver's car. And as an all-rounder, the S4, it's alright. Not quite as exciting as the Jaguar when it was at its very best, but much better in every single other regard, which, in all fairness, for a car of this type, is probably where it matters. There we go. That's my video for today. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.